NTV.
Well, it's that time in the show where we get to have some important conversations, and we're going to be having one about child marriage and teenage pregnancy during this period of COVID-19. Now, many people have been affected in different ways, and one of those particular groups is children. At least up to date, most children in Uganda and many parts of the world have not been spared when it comes to the COVID-19 pandemic, and in particular, an impact on social and economic status of the households continues to undermine their well-being. Unfortunately, the numbers now, when it comes to a recent report that was revealed, it showed that March to July, a total of 21,260 cases of child abuse were reported to police. And it's evident that the closure of schools has also had a significant impact on the safety of children. Taking a look at the safety this morning, I am joined by Irene Kagoya, the Associate Director Advocacy at World Vision. Good morning and welcome to Morning at NTV, Irene.
Good morning, and thank you for having me this morning. I really appreciate it.
That's good. Now we'll just start with such numbers, quite worrying. 21,260 cases reported, and these are ones reported to police. So it could even be more.
Certainly.
How did we get here as a country?
I think we have to first understand that even prior to the outbreak of COVID-19, the situation was already bad. You know, according to a survey that was undertaken by Ministry of Gender, it showed that 1 in every 3 girls had suffered sexual violence, at least during their childhood. And even when you look at the 2019 police crime report, over 13,000 children had suffered defilement. So you see that the outbreak of COVID-19, if anything, has only unveiled the actual status of child protection in this country. Because looking at our communities, looking at our societies, the issue of child protection is still a silent pandemic. Of course, we are dealing with COVID-19 as a pandemic, but child protection and violence against children is one of those silent pandemics that are impacting on children in very many ways. But many people in our society have not fully appreciated the magnitude of violence against children in this country. Because, like the statistics you've highlighted, these are not just figures. This is the life of a girl who is now pregnant at 13, at 15, and her future, if not addressed at that moment, could be the end, because then she's going to drop out of school.
Yes.
For some, it means that she's now going to even find herself in a situation where she's HIV and AIDS positive because of this kinds of situation. And with the outbreak of COVID-19 and the continued closure of schools, children are now at home. Children are loitering in communities, you know. And the impact that COVID-19 has had on families is grave. Parents are now being pushed to send their children to the streets to fend for the family. Parents have gone out to look for survival and left children at home in the hands of caretakers that are equally stressed, you know. So we are in a situation whereby government and other stakeholders, if we do not come out to address this particular silent pandemic behind the COVID-19 situation, we are bound to see ourselves losing out. We are bound to see a regression whereby we are going to have more school dropouts. We are going to see a situation where more children are involved in marriages. And in the end, that impacts on their production as citizens. Even the children they bring into this world, they cannot care for them. You know, and for them, some of them, it would mean, for us, some of us, it would mean that the maternal mortality rates are also going to go high. So, in terms of us realizing some of the goals that we set out to achieve, for instance, under the Sustainable Development Goals, we are bound to see ourselves not meeting those targets.
But just to take you back, you mentioned that all of this is, what we're seeing now is only exposing an ugly truth that has been with us. And where did we go wrong from the start? Because all these things that we see have slowly been piling up. Was there someone who kept quiet? Is it a society that believes children should simply be instructed to go this way and that is it? Is it a society that is not in touch with how they should protect a child?
I'll start from the very basics of appreciating that the fundamental protection of a child begins from the family unit, from the community, you know. And historically speaking, in this country, the role of raising up a child was communal. But as we've gone along the way, even as parents, we have diverted from that path. We've left children to almost to themselves, if I should use the word. They have to look out for themselves in a sense, you know. And we are not spending time with our children because of the economic pressures. You know, you move out in the morning and you're back in the evening. Even in some of the rural settings, some of the parents will go for gardening with some of the children, but other children will stay at home, and then they come back, and whatever has transpired in between the day, you cannot tell because of all the pressure, because of the hard work. We do not have that time to really interact and understand what our children are going through. So that whole aspect. But again, there is the whole situation whereby, as the government of Uganda, we've put in place laws and policy frameworks. I think Uganda has one of the best legal frameworks and policies when it comes to issues of child protection, because we have fully domesticated the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Children, you know, capturing the well-being of a child in all aspects, you know, whether it's social, whether it's economic, whether it's issues of their health, issues of their education. We want to see a child who is holistically brought up in a way that they are able to fully realize their potential. And that is captured very beautifully in our policies. But the problem that we have experienced and the challenge that we've had is how we enforce these laws and policies.
When you talk about enforcement, over the weekend, there was a story that ran the NTV Weekend Edition where there was a crime preventer who defiled an 8-year-old girl. And he was let off. He was taken to police, but eventually along the way, he was released. So when it goes to enforcement, whether we have the most beautiful policies in place, but when it comes to enforcement and how this fails the particular ideal plan of protecting a child.
Yes, and it's a serious problem, because even when you look at some of these policies, they are designed in a way that we are looking at prevention, we are looking at response and support for the survivors. But the aspect of prevention in itself, we are not working on that in as much as we should. For instance, during this period with the outbreak of COVID-19 pandemic, we very well know what the situation is like. The statistics are there. There is no doubt. But we are not seeing a well-coordinated and planned move from the different stakeholders to really tackle this, especially looking at the different ministries. Because when you look at questions of child protection, they bring in players from different sectors. We are looking at education, we are looking at Ministry of Gender, we are looking at Ministry of Health. So we are not seeing a coordination, a strong coordination within these sectors to be able to support and protect these children, especially during this period. I'll take a practical example, for instance, right now. And it's not to downplay the efforts around the fight against COVID-19. But the message has gone out strong and clear, you know, about prevention of COVID-19. How about a message that goes out strong and clear at all levels about the protection of our children in this country? And that has to come right from the top to the bottom, you know, because I would like to see a situation where people who are speaking on megaphones in our communities about COVID-19 are equally speaking about child protection, to make sure that these children are safe in a language that the children understand, in a language that parents understand. You know? So we would like to see those programs. You know, right now the government is doing a lot of efforts, and we appreciate, in terms of supporting children to continue learning while at home. But as we do that, can we see also deliberate efforts around making sure that messaging around child protection is delivered as well, even within, because when you look at the school environment, the school does not just serve for learning the set curriculum. It also supports other life skills and knowledge, information. You know, children are being told about their social well-being as well at school, how to behave, how to conduct themselves. So there are all these aspects. So we should not look at learning in terms of passing exams, literally, especially during this moment. But there are also other life skills that should be coming with these programs, whether it's on television or it is on radio, that the teacher, before even they commence class, they ask about these children and how they are taking care of themselves, and whether they are, you know, so they bring out those messages that help them understand that, oh, I need to make sure that I'm safe, so that next year or next month, whenever school opens, that I can get back to school.
You mentioned top to bottom. Let's start from bottom. When you mentioned the fact that, you know, there should be these messages that are conveyed in different ways, and clear, direct message in whatever language when it comes to children and their protection, which is a right for them. But if at all these messages are being taken out, but we have a mentality, say within particular parents, that, you know, a girl is a commodity. A girl, if at all we don't have money, we can simply sell her off, or simply marry her off, and whatever bride price comes, we can actually be able to survive as a family. Taking it back to just behavioral change in the parents' minds, the community, the caretaker, trying to take that, because even if that message is put as loud as possible, if it's drumming and the drum is beaten as loud as possible, if at all the mentality of a parent does not change to realize that a child is precious, that in one way will ruin all the messages that have been taken out, watered down actually. So let's talk about that.
Thank you for highlighting that, because social norms and practices remain one of the driving factors behind violence against children, especially questions of child marriages. I'll take an example in some of the refugee settings. Some of the people in those in the refugee settings, when a girl becomes pregnant, for instance, in order to protect the family name, they would rather get that girl to marriage as straight as possible, because looking at their cultures, for some of them it means that they want this girl to get into marriage when they are pure, sort of. So in a sense, they will be forced to give away this girl in marriage at that particular point in time, because they want to protect that family name, and even in some of our communities. So issues of social norms and cultural practices, those ones remain a huge challenge in this country. And again, we just have to continue engaging these communities. And at World Vision Uganda, we are running a campaign dubbed "It Takes a World to End Violence Against Children." And in that particular campaign, we look at working with cultural institutions as a critical player in terms of influencing subjects to really understand and appreciate their cultures, to really understand and appreciate that child marriage is not part of their cultures, you know, that even within the ambit of culture, that the law supersedes, you know. You cannot marry off a girl below the age of 18, and all cultural institutions subscribe to that law. So for us, it's for us to continue engaging these cultural institutions, and at the same time is to continue to see that cultural leaders publicly come out to denounce and condemn acts of marriages that involve children.
Interactions with World Vision and the cultural leaders at this point in time in that particular campaign, how has it been engaging and taking a look into their minds?
It It has been helpful in a sense, because I'll take an example of our engagement with the Busoga Kingdom, whereby we are working with the cultural institutions, with the Busoga Kingdom right now, to support them to put in place a child protection policy. And we believe and trust that with this child protection policy, the kingdom will have a framework that supports their outreaches, that supports them to make sure that communities are protecting children from all forms of violence. The other one I could also refer to is our engagement with the Buganda Kingdom in Butambala, where the kingdom is working with parents, is sensitizing parents by they're organizing scientific engagements with a few parents, and in one of the instances they're able to even organize a Zoom engagement with the children. So they are creating spaces where they can interface with these parents, where they can interface with the children and discuss these particular issues. Yes.
Okay, now we mentioned the social bit of it, but taking a look at one of the driving forces for what we're looking at right now, these numbers continue to rise even before COVID-19, during this pandemic, and perhaps if we don't do something now, they could rise post-COVID-19. But taking a look at the economic aspect, how then, after you have changed the mindset of a parent, how then do you empower them economically? What happens? What does World Vision do on that end to make them realize that your child is not something for you to get money from?
Of course, economic empowerment of parents is critical, especially looking at the fact that some of the economic pressures within the home during this period have really gone up, and they are a driving factor for parents to push their children into child marriage, for parents to lure their children into sexual exploitation activities. So as World Vision, looking at our programs, we work to really see that children are able to realize their potential fully. So we also have programs that are initiated towards empowering families. I'll take an example of our response programs, like the recent outbreak of the floods in Kasese, you know. So we come out to support some of these families, especially during that time, that they are able to have, for instance, a decent meal, they're able to have food on the table during this period, because those are some of the drivers that will push parents to say, probably, I think I can't feed an extra mouth now, you know. And then in a longer term, we also look at engaging households, you know, whereby we support them economically in communities to be able to have a standing to raise some money. Some of them have been supported into working as circles in groups where they're able to work together and collect some resources that can support them meet the basic needs of their homes. So our programs are designed in such a way that they are holistic enough to support parents even economically, not just during this period, but even prior to this period. We have continued with our normal programming as well to support these parents.
All right, as we wrap this up, taking a look at recommendations for each stakeholder from top to bottom. We can start from the bottom or we can start from the top, but what do we expect, what would you want to see change for each and every individual and stakeholder, from government to the police, if it's the courts of law, because there's also the fact that, you know, eventually these people, are they tried for what they have done wrong? Yes.
No, absolutely. I think I'll start my message with the boys and girls out there. The First Lady, who is also Minister of Education and Sports, has encouraged children to take care of themselves. And I think her message was loud and clear. But I would also like to urge every child out there to support each other, to know that you need to take care of yourself. It does not help you to engage in a sexual activity when you're still young. And if anybody out there tries to lure you into a sexual activity, tell it to your mother or your father or your guardian, or anyone around your neighborhood that you can talk to. Tell them somebody X is doing ABC. Do not keep quiet. Do not keep quiet. Do not stay silent. And secondly, the children out there should be able to call out for and report such cases. We have Sauti 116. It's a call line. Ask someone to give you a phone and call and report, or ask someone to help you report the matter. To the parents out there, it's one message that we should not see ourselves in situations where we are compromising cases of child marriage or teenage pregnancy, or even pushing our children into teenage pregnancy. So for parents out there, if somebody has been found to be in a situation where they've engaged a child in marriage, please do not stand in the way of the law. Let the law take its course. If someone has defiled a child as a parent, you should not come out to say, okay, now that my child has been defiled, I think it's better I give off this child into marriage. No, this child still has hope. So let the law take its course and do not stand in the way of justice. And when it comes to government, it's important that government works out clear ways of strengthening the coordination between the government structures and the cultural structures. Because in most of our communities, these cultural structures, institutions have structures right from the grassroots. So if it would be very helpful if our government, through Ministry of Gender, would work to ensure that the government structures, right from LC1 to the government structures and the cultural structures that have been established, work hand in hand and come together to support and address issues of child marriage and teenage pregnancy during this period. And the other thing that we are calling upon is Ministry of Education and Sports. Would like to see that Ministry of Education and Sports rolls out a clear program through the district education offices to support and reach out to each and every household to protect their children during this period. Because when you look at the task force that has been set up at the districts on COVID-19, would like to see that issues of child protection are also discussed, and deliberated upon during these task force engagements. Because yes, we are experiencing a pandemic that is grave, that must be addressed, and that we are doing all that we can to stop. But at the end of it all, we do not want to see ourselves in a situation where we have prevented COVID-19, but on the other hand, we have created a bigger problem that we cannot come out of. So can we see a holistic response to this pandemic? And finally, is to call upon the Ministry of Gender, Labor and Social Development to fast-track the review of the national strategy on ending child marriage and teenage pregnancies, because that strategy is important.
Now more than ever it is. With such numbers, you can see that there has to be something done.
Yes,
well, thank you so much for joining us on Morning at NTV, Irene. I think we have definitely seen, and you now know that it's each of us has a role to play when it comes to ending child marriages within the country and also teenage pregnancies. There's something you can say. You may say, I don't have a child, I really shouldn't be a part of this conversation, but you have a neighbor who has a child, and it's also your responsibility to look out and see, is everything okay? Who might be this person that is just always going round and round them? Do they hang around the people that are not right for them? And also, has that child around your community suddenly disappeared? Where did they go? Ask those questions. That was our conversation this morning about ending child marriages and also teenage pregnancies within the country. Thank you once again, Irene. We're now going to take a short break, but we'll be